Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeanette Gabriel. I'm the director of the Schwalb Center for Israel and Jewish Studies here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. I'm very pleased to welcome everyone tonight to our special program From Jerusalem to Omaha, Michael Staenberg's Vision for a Jewish Future. And I'd like to say a few comments about the Schwalb Center. For those of you who are new to the Schwalb Center, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year with a very exciting set of programs this fall. We'll be having two programs on new literature on Jewish migration, examining new scholarship that's emerging, looking at the history of Jewish migration. Dr. Adam Teller from Brown University will be with us in October on his new book, Rescue the Surviving Souls, the Great Refugee Crisis of the 17th Century. And in December, Dr. Devi Mays, professor of Judaic Studies from University of Michigan, will be discussing her brand new book, Forging Ties, Forging Passports, Migration and the Modern Sephardi Diaspora. In addition to that, we have two additional exciting programs, one featuring Dr. Ruth Halperin-Kadari from Bar-Ilan University, the founding director of the Rachman Center for the Advancement of the Status of Women, who will be talking about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women in Israel. And then a very special program with our partners from the Tri-Faith Initiative in November, where I will be speaking with Dr. Terrence L. Johnson from Georgetown University on African American and Jewish interrelations. So those are just a few of our upcoming programs. If you would like more information or information on how to get involved with the Schwalb Center, you can see our website. So I'm very pleased tonight to welcome our speaker, Michael Staenberg. Michael is founder and president of the Staenberg Group. He's a leader, visionary, and philanthropist. He has achieved unprecedented success in the commercial real estate sector and has helped to create quality communities nationwide and has contributed to hundreds of nonprofit organizations throughout the United States and Israel through his dedication to philanthropy and his deep, authentic desire for tikkun olam. In 2005, Michael and his wife Carol established the Staenberg Family Foundation, a supporting foundation of the Jewish Federation of St. Louis. Their mission is to ensure that the Jewish community, as well as the greater St. Louis region, thrives and flourishes. And tonight we will have the opportunity to talk about Michael's work, not just in St. Louis, but also in Denver, Kansas City, Omaha, and Israel. Michael and the foundation have given almost $150 million in financial support to organizations, as well as in-kind services valued over $200 million. More than 70% of the money that they've given has been allocated to Jewish causes within local communities they support. So we are very pleased tonight to have an opportunity to talk with Michael about his vision that has motivated his philanthropy over the years. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. A very nice introduction.
I'm wondering if you could begin tonight, for people who don't know about your background and your background here in Omaha, to talk a little bit about your early life in Omaha and some of the motivations that inspired you to get involved in your business life and your philanthropic outlook.
First, thank you. First, I want to thank the Schwalb family for what they're doing at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And I told you I had a little surprise. So in my junior year, I went to Arizona State and I had mono, so I couldn't attend my junior year. So I did take 4 classes in the summer at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. So I am somewhat of an alum now, I guess, for taking those 4 classes.
We will claim you as an alumni.
Okay, okay. So I grew up in Omaha, born in 1954. I'm 66 years old. And it was a great experience growing up in Omaha. I remember all my parents' friends and how close the Jewish community was. And it was really an interesting experience because it was very close, and it's hard to explain how close it was back then. But I remember a lot of the early childhood memories of all the people that I look up to, and I see their names at the Federation and the JCC today, and I'm just in awe of what they were able to accomplish. But growing up in Omaha was interesting, to say the least. My dad was a early apartment developer, and he really, along with my mom, they were both very, very different, gave me the foundation for who I am today. And unfortunately, my father passed away when we were 13 years old. We were watching Walt Disney one Sunday night. And it really, I think, changed the dynamics of everything, that who I am and what I've become. And it's really about that has done that. And my mom was one of those people that everybody liked, and was very, very influential in my life too, in a completely different way. But to give you a story about my father, you see the red coat. You asked about the red coat behind me. And, you know, growing up in Nebraska, the N doesn't stand for knowledge. It was Nebraska football. And I remember I wanted that red coat. And my dad had a sixplex off of Underwood somewhere. And I remember he said to me, if you work 40 hours at 25 cents, we'll get you $10 and you can buy that red coat. And I thought, well, I'm a smart kid. Okay. So the 40 hours came. And I remember that it was Friday afternoon. You know, Shabbos was coming. You don't conduct business on Shabbos. And he said, sit down, we're going to settle up. And he took 10 $1 bills out. And he put 5 in a pile. And he put 3 in a pile. And he put 2 in a pile. And I looked at him and I said, something, you know, as a 10-year-old, I knew something wasn't going to go right here. And he said, which side would you like to start with? I said, well, let's start with the 5. Well, that's yours. Good job. I'm thinking, well, that's not going to get me that red coat. And he took the 3 and he put it in the pile and he said, we're partners. You like the roof over your head and you like the food on the table. And then I said, what about the 2? He said, well, we're not a 10% tzedakah family. We're a 20% tzedakah family. And of course, I got up in a fit of rage and I was very disappointed by all this and ran underneath the bed and didn't want to come out. And I remember my dad was about 6'3", 6'4", about 260 pounds. And he used to say, young man, come on. And he said to me, you got 2 choices. You can quit or you can get up and do it again. And of course, I got up and did it again. I was reluctant to do that. And I think my siblings might be on the Zoom tonight, and I want to say hello to them. And I know my wife Carol's on, and I'm not sure if any of my kids are, but you know, that was a great foundation of watching my dad work hard and make sure that we understood the value of money at that early age. And so, of course, I got the red coat. So in honor of him, several years ago, there's an artist that I buy a lot of stuff from. I figured he had these coats in his house that he was doing as artwork. And I said, can you make me a red coat? So anybody who walks in here always asks me the story of why that is. And so that was a great influence. But being 13 years old and not having a father was interesting times. You know, I know we all have different stories, and we didn't grow up entitled. We grew up, I'd say, very modestly. And we lived in a house off of 74th Street, right off 74th and Cass. House is probably 1,300 feet. I think there was 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and but that felt like a palace to us. And it was a great learning lesson because I worked at Hinky Dinky and I worked at a lot of different places growing up. I was a good bagger because we got tips at that age and back then, and so I wouldn't leave until I got my 25 cents. So I was doing pretty good. They wanted to promote me, but I would have taken less money than bagging, so I kept to the bagging. But that was a tough growing up without a father. I think my siblings would agree, even though my mother did as best a job as she could. But I had a lot of people like Melvin Freeman, Jerry Freeman, my friend Corey West. A lot of parents stepped in and really took an interest in who we were. And I remember they were very nice to us and trying to give us some guidance. And I remember I lived with the Corey Weston's parents for 6 months or so when I was 16. And they were really very influential, along with the West Side High School. I remember I wasn't doing very well at West Side, and I remember Dr. Phelps telling me, you're not going to make it here. And he brought me into his office and motivated me to make sure that I understood how important education was, and that money was important, but education was equally as important. And also the fact that I had a lot of Jewish friends. We went to West Side. We were on the west side of 72nd Street, which was the dividing line between Central and West Side. And all my friends went to Central. But I remember taking the bus from Crossroads down to the J. And the J became our second home. You know, besides going to Bethel and Rabbi Kripke and Cantor Edgar, who fond memories of them, we spent a lot of time at that JCC. And a lot of Jewish people, AZA, BBYO, etc. And they really were a great influence. And so that's one of the reasons I have a passion for JCCs, is because of my time in Omaha at 19th and Dodge. And we'll talk more about the JCCs as we go. But that's growing up in Omaha, and it was a great lifestyle. But I knew when I got to be 18 years old and went to college that the world was a bigger place. And we hadn't really done a lot of traveling as a family. And I figured, you know, I needed to go somewhere else. And I picked Arizona State for the nice weather. And I really didn't come back to Omaha to live or be a part of the, except for that semester or that summer that I spent going to UNO. And so I haven't spent a lot of time in Omaha, but I knew that my Midwestern roots were important to me. And that's why I moved back to the Midwest.
Well, that's such a fascinating thing for you to say. You know, I grew up in the Midwest as well. I grew up in rural Wisconsin and moved to the East Coast and said I would never come back to the Midwest. And it's been such a wonderful experience to be back in the Midwest. And there's really something special about Jewish communities in the Midwest. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of why you decided to stay in the Midwest, what you see as special about Jewish communities in the Midwest. You know, the Jewish community nationally really tends to focus on the coasts.
They do. East Coast, Florida, I guess that's the coast, and California. You know, I had a job offer. Well, first I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of school. I majored in business, and finance and economics was one of the things that interested me. And I had a job offer of Gulf Oil, and I'll never forget, I was going to make like $1,500 a month in 1976, which was a lot of money. And it was in LA. And I remember my mom saying, you know, your dad was going to be a great apartment developer. Maybe you want to get in the development business. And he had a fifth cousin named Irv Maislish in Kansas City. And, you know, I said, well, I called him, and it's January, and it's nice in Phoenix in January. And he wouldn't offer me a job, and I took that as a challenge. And I always knew I wanted to move back to the Midwest. I really didn't want to live in LA. I really didn't want to live on the East Coast. You know, the Nebraska roots took over. And I really think it's the fact that growing up in Omaha, even though it was 6,500 Jewish people, and there's probably the same amount today, probably hasn't grown a lot. I felt that I had a connection. I knew everybody. Like they felt like we were family. Even though I didn't know everybody, if you were Jewish, the Jews took care of the Jews and helped each other. And you could always get, you know, you had to sell yourself, but at least you could get in the door, and the door would be open, and you didn't have to figure out how to get through the door. And so I wanted to live in Kansas City because I thought it would be a great place to learn something, and I could always do something else. And I knew I didn't want to come back to Omaha because I thought it was too small after living in Phoenix. But Kansas City was a great choice. And it was one of the great places that I made that decision to do that. It was a great Jewish community. I think there's about 25,000 Jewish people that live in Kansas City. And I got there and it felt just like Omaha again. And one of the first places I went was the JCC. And I still have probably 10 to 12 good friends from the Kansas City JCC when I went there. And right now, we're as in Omaha, we're renovating. Our family is providing the dollars along with the expertise to renovate their JCC and add on. And it's going to be done in November, which I'm really happy about. But I'm involved because another Midwestern city, and I lived in Kansas City from 1976 to 1983.
So can you talk a little bit about what you see in terms of the Jewish, what sort of programs do you see coming out of these Jewish community centers throughout the Midwest that really contribute to the vitalization of Jewish life?
Going back to your previous question, I think that the reason I think the Jewish communities are different in the Midwest is because they're not transient. People haven't moved here. They have a long history. People have their grandparents that were born in Omaha. I know my grandparents have moved from Cleveland, and my mom was born there. So there was a lot of history. It wasn't a lot of moving around. But I do believe that these Midwestern communities, Kansas City, Omaha, St. Paul, and not so much Denver because it's much more transient, that these communities offer programs that are part of the culture and the fabric of the community. Every community is different. You know, I hear that all the time. We're different. Well, they are different. I mean, I don't believe that the Jewish community in St. Louis is exactly the same as Omaha. You know, Omaha is unique because it has 3 synagogues, a Chabad house. I mean, it's compact, but yes, it has everybody in the same location. I believe in St. Louis we have 17 synagogues. So it's a different thought process, and there's a different, but overall, all these Jewish communities are very similar. There's, you know, we're under the fact that there's assimilation. Everybody wants to be the homogenized white milk. And I think the Jays provide a very important community structure where you don't have to practice religion to go to the J. You get to see your friends. They have Jewish programs. They have Jewish influences. They have things that don't make you feel like you have to go to the synagogue. And the synagogue wasn't one of my favorite things to do growing up at Bethel. But, you know, the J is friendly. But if you want to even be as Jewish as you want, feel you can get to be any way you want to act to be Jewish. I have the saying, same tent, different door. And I believe the J allows you to be in that tent with not only Jews, but non-Jews, and to see how you can influence and think about how they think about being Jewish and how they think about Jews, and how we have to educate everyone that we're no different, that we respect everyone, and how we can all work together.
So you're saying such really interesting things there. I want to parse out a few points.
Sure.
The first is you're talking about sort of the Jewish Community Center as a secular Jewish space. And, you know, we see so many studies showing that the Jewish community is becoming increasingly secular, and concerns that that means that the Jewish communities are going to dissipate. And especially in smaller Midwest communities, that is a big fear. We're already a small population to begin with. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about that, because certainly there's broad programming that goes on at the synagogues as well. But you're saying that the Jewish Community Center provides sort of an important alternative space.
Well, the Pew study, we had a Pew study done in St. Louis, and we found out that actually, even though the synagogue's membership is declining, when we built a strong Jewish community center here in St. Louis, in fact, it enhanced and had people joining synagogues. We don't want to compete as the Jewish JCC developer. We're not trying to compete with the synagogues. A problem we have in the Jewish world is we have too much redundancy. I think we have too much redundancy. We have too many silos. How do we all work together? There's limited resources. And I think for a long time, the synagogues had a monopoly. The JCCs had a monopoly. You know, I remember growing up, we didn't have any other place to go in Omaha except to play basketball at the JCC. I don't believe it wasn't like we weren't welcome, but we weren't, you know, embraced to come visit any place else. You know, Highland Country Club was a Jewish country club. So that changed in the mid-'80s. And everybody started thinking, well, we can do different things. No different than the synagogues. They had a monopoly. They guilted you in, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but you had to join. Today, you have other choices, but how do we take the experience at the JCC and the programs and enhance the synagogues? And I really believe that it's up to both parties, not one to reach out to the other, but both of them to reach out to each other and see how we can make it work, both of us. because there's certain things that the synagogues do that the JCCs can't do, and vice versa. But if we cooperate and work together, I think it'll create a better opportunity, especially in Omaha. As I said, you have 3 synagogues, and you have and the JCC and the Chabad House, but you're right there. I mean, within 2 miles, everybody is in the same area, and I really believe that. And I've watched it. I've watched in Kansas City, they have a strong JCC, and in St. Louis we have a strong. And Omaha's, I think is going to be a strong JCC too. And, in Omaha, I think the building, and I have the 4 Ps, my theory of 4 Ps, is that you got to have places, which is buildings. You have to have programs. You have to have people, and you have to have, of course, persons. Well, the building in Omaha was relocated in 1974, and really hadn't had anybody talk about it and keep it relevant for at least 10 to 15 years. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not an operator of buildings. I rely on the programs that people need and want, and the people of the professional and lay to make a change. And I think we're doing that. And it starts, I think, with a good building. And we noticed that in no different than in St. Louis when we got involved in 2005, the JCC was almost out of business. Kansas City wasn't out of business, but they were losing members. So I think that's really what I'm trying to say.
So you're talking about cooperation and leadership and relying on local talent. It sounds to me like you're talking about a lot of lessons that you learned in business.
I did. Yeah,
I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
I've been so lucky in my life, especially with Jewish mentors. Irv Maislish. I remember he wouldn't hire me, and he finally did. And I showed up to the office in June of 1976, and he threw a set of plans at me and said, "Okay, hotshot, go to work." But he was a great mentor. And Arvin Gottlieb and Frank Morgan in Kansas City, they taught me that your word is your bond, and to do things the proper way. And that I remember Arvin Gottlieb always said, the money doesn't lead the deal leads the money. If you do the right deal, you will be paid, and people will respect you to do that. And I've been lucky, and I had in St. Louis, Mr. Millstone, i.e. Millstone, who was the guy in St. Louis for 30 years, Tommy Green. And they all, they took time and I reached out to them. They didn't reach out to me. I reached out to them and wanted to learn from them and understand how they tick and how to do business. And, I'm a tough businessman. There's no question about it. I got that reputation. But everybody will tell you that if I tell you something, you can count on it. And, I used to get a little more agitated than I do today. I guess it's the breathing exercises or meditation. I'm kidding. But it's the fact that I've had some great mentors. And they've been some non-Jewish mentors, My partner, Stan Kroenke, he and I did business for 20 years together, and then he just wanted to go a different way. And I respect that. I'd say thank you if you walked in the room today. But I learned a lot from him. And, it's like Johnny Carson wasn't as good without Ed McMahon, and Ed McMahon wasn't as good without Johnny Carson. And, it's always good to have a collaboration. Today, I have a gentleman that I do business with in Denver, Larry Meisel, and he's my senior advisor. I met him because of Tommy Fellman. And Tommy's a great friend of mine. And you never know what you might pick up and who you might learn from. And, I remember Tommy Green said to me, when I moved to St. Louis, I met him in 85 or 86. And that's how I got going to Israel, because he said, "You're going with me." And I said, "Well, it's dangerous." He said, "No, you'll be okay. You're going with me." And he always said, you got to start giving and putting your name on it. People respect people that put their name on giving. Even if you can't give a lot of money, take the passion and take the time to show people what you can do. So I've had a lot of mentors, and I certainly didn't get here by myself. I've made plenty of mistakes, but I've had people say to me very candidly, "That was kind of stupid, don't you agree?" And I would say, "Yeah, you're right. That was kind of stupid. I do agree." But you have to have honest feedback. And in business, you have to, treat people with respect and try to understand where they're coming from. Sometimes it's hard. when you're young and you're hungry and I didn't come from a lot of money, as I mentioned, and I wanted to make a lot of money. But I realized that, money is a great servant, a bad master. And when you learn that and you understand that, the 3 nickels, everybody, you get a nickel, I keep a nickel, and one stays on the table, you'll be a lot better businessman going forward.
So you mentioned about putting your name on things, and that it's important to do that because it inspires other people and shows leadership in the community. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's important. Our family is lucky. We have our name in a lot of things. And, there's some things that probably my family said, well, why'd you put your name on it? But I think it's important for people to understand. But again, I want people to understand that you can do this, to inspire others. One of the things I'm really trying to do, and I mentor some people here, and we'll talk about how we do grant making and stuff like that. But I want to get the next generation. I was lucky that the people I mentioned before, several people, and there's lots more people than that took an interest and said to me, show people. They want to see your name. They want people to, I remember all the names in Omaha, the Baker family, the Newman family, the Rikus family, on and on, that inspired people. You saw their name on things. You see when you go to the cornerstone at the building and you say, I want to be that guy, and it makes you proud, do that. And, you want to honor people of the past. And, I'm especially proud of my parents. And, I named the Arts and Education Wing at the Federation Building, the J, Marty and Marlene Staenberg. So I want people to realize that, they were there and they were why I'm successful. And so, now, I'm good. I think I have enough names on JCCs. I'm good, but it's important. And there's a story, there's a gentleman named Mort Mandel. Mort Mandel just passed away at 98 years old. And Mort was from Akron, Ohio. And about 10 years ago, I read about him, and I picked up the phone and I said, Mort, I'd like to come meet you. I have 20 minutes, and he's in West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach. And I said, okay, I'm good. I flew down the night before, and I figured, I always show up early, try to be 10 minutes early, but I haven't been doing well lately on that. And I walked in and I see these Picassos, and his name's on a lot of different things, and the Mandel Institute in Israel and everything. And he's a short little guy. And first question, he says, Mike, I only have 20 minutes. I said, thank you for taking the time. This is like going to see Babe Ruth of philanthropy, because he gave away a couple $2 billion in his lifetime. And I walk in and I'm looking at all these fancy pictures, and here's a little guy, 5'3", 5'4", and he puts his arm around me and says, I got one question, just one question today. I said, okay, why do you give to these charities? And without hesitation, I looked at him and I said, because it makes me feel good. And I ended up spending 6 hours that day with him. And that's what it's all about. And he says, keep putting your name on things. Let people know it makes you feel good, and keep trying to inspire other people. So that's what we do. And, I'm good right now, but also, I have the luxury of today of being able to write the big checks. But, I always tell people, if you want my money, you get my advice. And if you want my advice, you get my money. And I'm not the most diplomatic person. I just get in there and I do things. And I'm more excited about giving someone $1,000 today and making a difference in their life than giving $1 million. And they ask me what they can do for me. And all I tell them is, I hope it makes you feel good and just help somebody else.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the different types of grants that you give and how you focus on smaller payments, and the process that you sort of try to engage boards in giving out some of the funds.
Right. So our family, as you said, started our foundation in 2005. And we really didn't do a very good job prior to that. It was kind of a willy-nilly. Somebody called me and I said, okay, I'll give you some money. Didn't consult with anybody. And again, my friend Tom Green and Mr. Millstone says, we should have a little more organized process. So we sat down and we came up with the areas that we wanted to give money to. Jewish causes, as you mentioned, 70%, education, a lot of different, Jewish camping and things like that. So we also said, how can we make a difference in people's lives? So I'm part of the Regional Business Council here in St. Louis, and it's to promote St. Louis. And it started, I want to say, probably 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, at least now. And I was a founding member, and I don't know why they asked me to do this, but they did, and I was honored that they would. And about 10 years ago, I was sitting in the, listening to one of their, monthly meetings, and I said, how can we make a difference in this community? Because, you have a lot of big leaders that are giving a lot of money. So Kathy Osborne is the regional director, and I said, Kathy, why don't we come up and try to raise $500,000 and give out grants of $50,000 to nonprofits that need $2,500 to $5,000. They might need an HVAC, they might need some IT, they might need this, that, whatever they might need. And they have to take in, if we give them $2,500, they have to raise new funds at $2,500. So we started that, and I was involved. I was helping picking the charities along with 6 other people. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I said, this is silly. We're not inspiring the next generation, the young professionals. They call it the YPO, of the Young Professional Organization of the RBC. So now they're the ones who picked it. So I said, well, now if I can do it there, why not do it for Jewish charities? So I went to the Federation, and we have a great executive director who handles our foundation, Mindy Fredman. And I said, Mindy, how do we do this so that we're not the ones picking? Here's a set number, and please have a group of kids, and I call them kids, of anywhere from 22 to 35, that helps pick these organizations to make a difference. So they understand they have to vet them, they have to make sure that the money is spent right, and that we don't make the decisions. And that's what we've done. And we've done that in St. Louis for, I think, 5 years now. I think we're on our 3rd year in Omaha, and another family, anonymous family, I can't quite get this person to put his name on it, but I might one day, has matched us. So we do it with Lori Feldman in Omaha. We do it in Denver. And I think it's great because I bet we've given to over 200 Jewish organizations in these 3 cities, synagogues, any, JFS, whatever the Jewish charity is, that they need the money, they'll make a difference. And we don't turn anybody down. I let the other peoples do that. There's only one person I've turned down because I had a budget too big. And the $5,000 they were asking would not have made a difference. And I thought it was better spent somewhere else. And I always typically end up spending more money because I feel bad that these charities need the money. So we've really done that in a lot of different cities. And I'm trying to encourage people, again, they see our name, the Staenberg Anything Grants. You guys can do that. It doesn't take a lot of money to make a big change. Small money equals big change.
It's so exciting. I also really love the way that you're sort of bringing on boards of younger people, in a sense, mentoring them to think about a future life of service in the community, and encouraging them to think about themselves as philanthropists in the future. Would you say that's sort of what your role is?
Yeah, well, I try to ask them what's important to them. Don't try to be on 30 different boards like me. I spend too much time doing this, but I like it. It makes me feel good. But pick 1 or 2 where you can make a difference. But if you do it, make sure you actually do it. It's not the big amount of money, but we had a conversation the other night about passion. Well, passion's great, but you need to have more than passion. You need to follow through. Words are cheap. Words don't cost anything. Whiskey costs money. So make sure you understand how to really make a difference. Make a commitment, really work it. And you know what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I'm trying to inspire the next generation. I'm trying to inspire my kids because I think it's important. And I've said to each of them, I think the nonprofit's a great world, but get involved. Just don't write a check. I'm proud of my daughter, Rachel. She's a part of the Jewish Light here. My daughter, Hannah, she's involved with the homeless. So she's a waitress and gives money she's the waitress to the homeless at a cafe in New York. And my daughter, Leah, does a lot of different things too. And I'm really proud that they would take the time and just not write the check. And I really think it's important. And I think it's important, especially to be on these boards, to understand what other people are thinking. And I can't emphasize that enough.
So you mentioned earlier your first trip to Israel. And I wonder if you would tell us about what your first experience in Israel was like.
It was different. It was the Federation. It was a typical Federation trip. And I got there and I'm looking around. And of course, they take you to, Jerusalem, and you go to the Wailing Wall, and they take you through the, all the tourist stuff. And I'm sitting there, and I felt, that was, it didn't feel as safe. I feel safer in Israel than I do in America a lot of times, except for today. You can't go because of the COVID. But, it was a different, I wouldn't say it was spiritual, but there was a different meaning. You got to see a lot of the history and understand. And, I found that it was really different being there, because you read things in the paper and it really doesn't put it in context. I have a lot of Jewish friends, and I understand how they think about Bibi and how they think about, the religious, and you have to be able to spend time to understand that. And the first I was there 7 days, and of course they got me to Tel Aviv, and the Federation said, "So what are you giving?" Tom Green puts his arm, "Okay, we're here for the ask." I said, "Well, I knew this was coming." So that first experience was okay, but I've been back many times since then, and I really enjoy Israel. I've tried to buy some companies there. I haven't been successful. I'm building a museum there called the Museum of Tolerance. My friend Larry got me involved 5 or 6 years ago with this, and it's a great experience. I've really learned a lot about the Israelis, how they think, and what we're trying to create. The Museum of Tolerance in Jerusalem is, again, social change. It's the history of how the state became what it is, and take you and understand. We have a kids area, we have an amphitheater, we have a lot of different really interesting things. We have a 280,000 square foot building. We're at $280 million. We only have 6 months left. We thought we'd be finished by now. We've raised the money. We're still a little short. So anybody listening tonight, if they want to donate, we're good with that. But it's been a great experience. I think it's been invaluable to me as a businessman and a person. So a lot of times people say, "Why do you do all this nonprofit?" I would have never met Larry without this. I would have never gotten reconnected with the people in Omaha, Kansas City. The business opportunities, you never know when you sit on a board who you're going to sit next to. And a lot of different things. So it's been a great experience to do that. And I really like going to Israel. It's a hard trip. And, I'm looking forward to going back to see the museum, because I haven't been there since January, which is a long time in the last 5 years for me. But it's a different culture, different thought. And I have much more respect for how people's beliefs are by going there.
So it's interesting, your choices of sort of the Midwest and Israel. And, I was really excited about that, because that's so much of the focus of the Schwalb Center, that the vision of Nate and Hannah Schwalb 10 years ago was in this small Midwest city, that people should learn about Israel, that people should learn about Jewish culture and have opportunities to make those connections. And I'm intrigued as to sort of that you've kept your philanthropic base in the Midwest, but then reached out to Israel.
Well, Israel reached out to me. It helped Larry.
That's beautiful.
But even though, now I really like it. So there's a school called Yemen Ord in the north part of Israel. And I had a friend of mine from Atlanta. And again, the JCC, I would have never met my friend Louis Shubin without being involved in the JCC. So I went around and tried to find different JCCs I like to build, and I couldn't find one. But I went to Atlanta, and there was a guy named Michael Ween, and he says to me, "I have a friend, you two would be friends," et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of blew him off. And one day I'm in Steamboat skiing, and he says, "I'm the guy you blew off." And we've become best friends. But he adopted, Atlanta has a lot of ties to Yemen Ord, and he took me on a trip there. And of course, I can't say no. And it's a school that is in the north part of Israel, north of Tel Aviv, and it's for kids, Russians, Ethiopians, kids that need the second chance. And they really have a holistic approach. It's called the Village Way, and it's really a great, great program. And it got me involved. And, you know, I like going there to talk to the kids and say, look, I was one of your kids. You know, they say they didn't have a parent. Oh, I didn't have a parent. You know, I wasn't homeless, but these kids are really, and they've really, really changed. And they got these kids in a program, a gap year afterwards. And they really have done a beautiful job of teaching them discipline and bringing the families in. And so I've been doing this for 3 years, and I'm going to build their new gym for them when I can get back there. And that led me to another area where I'm trying to build a JCC in Lod, which is just outside of Tel Aviv. It's one of the poor, it's one of the oldest cities in Israel, but it's one of the poorer cities in Israel. And a friend of mine, Richard Barron, got me involved. And so I find it to be very fascinating that if I had to pick somewhere where, you know, I can make a difference. I have the skill set. It's not the money. I have the skill set to make the building difference, because I really believe that buildings set the tone for how you perceive the programs, and it helps attract the right people. You know, people want to be in nice buildings. Everybody likes nice buildings. I mean, we're not talking about the Ritz-Carlton, but we want to talk about the nuances. What feels good? What makes you want to go in that building? Is it the art? Is it the height of the ceiling? Is it the lighting? So that's where I can make a difference. And that's what I want to do. And I think I can make a difference. And Larry and I worked, you know, Larry's a developer. He's a home builder. And I'm a real estate developer of commercial properties. And we work well together. You know, he said, I never would have thought that. I would have never seen that. And I said, I would have never done that. His wife, Carol, has done a beautiful job of stuff in there. And, you know, sometimes you have to say, well, what's the walkability? So there's a lot of things. So you ask why Israel? Because I can make a difference. And, you know, Israel, you know, when I go there, I'm trying to make sure these people understand they're not great philanthropists yet. That's one of the things, you know, I'd like to encourage the Israelis. And I have several good friends that have moved to the United States, and I always talk about it. And they say we weren't brought up that way. Going back to my dad and the 20% rule, you know, that taught me. And we also, when we went to the synagogue, we always had to take something for that tzedakah box. I have in my office the original tzedakah box from when I grew up, and it's still full. I haven't emptied it yet. I probably should empty it, but that's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff why I want to go to Israel.
Well, you know, when you talk about buildings, what I hear you saying is community. I really hear you talking about building a community where there's space for everyone to kind of come in and be Jewish and become acquainted with the Jewish community. And, you know, there's so much diversity within the Jewish community. Do you think that's really important to sort of create some sort of unified space?
I think it's, as you said, it's community. So I came up with the saying, everyone is welcome. I put that on every JCC I'm involved in. And I believe that everyone is welcome. You know, as I said, same tent, different door. I mean, growing up, there was the Reform, the Conservative, and the Orthodox. Today, I think there's 99 different ways to be, you know, the synagogues. I've never seen so many synagogues. You know, here in St. Louis, I think we have 17. And I'm not, that's good, but everybody has a way of thinking about it. And I respect the Orthodox. I have a lot of good friends that are modern Orthodox, Gouda Orthodox. I mean, you know, I get it. And, you know, and everyone is welcome. So we have, as Jews, we have this diversity within ourselves, but people who are on the outside, who aren't Jewish, don't understand that. They think if you're Jewish, you're Jewish. They don't understand the different layers. And going back to Israel, I've learned that. There's all types in Israel. The non-secular, Rabbi Stav is a friend of mine, and he's one of the rabbis that's trying to bring interfaith marriages so people can get married. He's outside of Tel Aviv. Very fascinating guy, very Orthodox, but he says, you know, we're going to lose our position if we don't allow people to marry the way they want to marry. And so, I always tell people that it's important to have some religion. I've watched families that isn't from a mixed marriage and have no religion. Pick Catholic, but pick something. And I think because you need that growing up, that discipline, that repetitiveness to think about a greater good than yourself.
I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the Museum of Tolerance, because it sounds like there's some similarities in how you envision that space to the Jewish community centers, and yet it's different, right?
Well, it's different, but we want it to be, it's 2 blocks from the King David, a block from the Citadel. So it's right in the heart of, you're exactly 1 mile from the wall. Maybe. You have to kind of zigzag. It's probably closer. It's right in the heart. And we want everyone to feel, no matter how you practice being Jewish, the Orthodox to the non, and to people, the visitors, we want people around the world to come to understand the story. It is a center that we want inclusion. And we want it to feel that people can come for different reasons. We're going to have an Anne Frank exhibit in there. We're going to have classrooms in there. We have 3 theaters. We have a place for weddings and bar mitzvahs and outside and, music events. So we're really trying to be something for everyone so that people don't feel intimidated. How can they feel like they can be part of this? And in Israel, the museums are completely different than they are in America. People in Israel don't want to pay for anything, which is okay. And so that's why we've endowed it, to make sure that we are allowing everyone to be able to come join us. And of course, we'll be closed on Shabbos, but we want visitors because, Jerusalem, I think, where they have 7 or 8 million people a year that come visit us, I think something like that. And, we're different than Yad Vashem. We don't want to be the Yad Vashem. We want people to think about us differently. No different than what we're trying to do here in St. Louis. We're building a Holocaust museum here. And we want it to be a social lab. We want to remember the Holocaust, but we want to also remember how diversified our lives are and how in the last 6 months we've really seen that. How do we make an impact? And, it's just, it's perspective. And how do we come together as people? We're all the same. And, it's time that we all put our differences apart and, forget the political viewpoint. I'm sure I'll get some chuckles on that, but we all need to figure out how we can get together and work because, the COVID is a common enemy. Global warming is a common enemy. We all have to say, you don't get to pick on this one. You got to do it. And, I respect, what everybody's trying to do and figure out how we can be respectful for everybody. And that's one of the things that the Jays allows me to do. As I said, everyone is welcome. I feel like I'm at the United Nations on Sundays in St. Louis watching the basketball league. It's the most amazing thing, and everybody feels comfortable. So that's kind of how the Museum of Tolerance, our museum here in St. Louis is going to be. We're really trying to make a difference and teach people, and I said the word teach, because you have to bring them along. You can't just say, well, this is it. People don't do that. They have to learn. And we're trying to get people to learn that. And, the Holocaust was, we're losing our Holocaust survivors. This is 70 years ago, 68, 70 years ago now. And we need to remember them and have a teaching point.
So what would you say to people who are concerned that when we open the door to museums of tolerance versus Yad Vashem, or when we open up Jewish community centers to have people who are outside the Jewish community sort of interact with the Jewish community, that there's this deep fear of sort of losing our Jewish spaces?
I think it enhances the Jewish spaces. I think it allows people who are Jewish to realize why they're Jewish and how important it is they're Jewish. I hear all these people love to use statistics. I hear that all the time. And I remember opening the J here and they said, well, only 60% of the people coming to the J and at the main campus are Jewish. I said, that's not how you should look at it. How many more Jewish families did we get that came because of the new facility? And it was up like 80 or 90%. We got more people engaged that were Jewish. And sure, the total number maybe went to 65%, 70%. But that's, that's one of the things. And the same thing with the museum in Israel, the same thing with the museum here in St. Louis. I mean, there's no magic bullet to make you Jewish. I was on the board of Birthright. My daughter met her husband on Birthright. My youngest daughter went. And so I'm a big believer in Birthright. There's no pill that will make you feel more Jewish. You got Birthright, you got Jewish schools, you got day camps, you got overnight camps. I'm on the board of Foundation for Jewish Camping, BBYO. There's a lot of different organizations, but again, how do we all work together to make us feel that way? And I really believe that. Before, as we talked about, synagogues and the J was really the only places you could go. Today, there's a lot more opportunities and a lot more programs that we can all learn from.
So maybe as we wrap up here, you can tell us a little bit about if you were going to say what you would want to see in terms of the Jewish philanthropic community. What would be a goal? Would you want to see sort of a network or better coordination, or it sounds like you're sort of reaching out in all these different ways to try to engage people however they're going to come in. Do you have sort of a vision of a more institutionalized way of making that happen?
I think we need to put her, I was in Omaha today. I'm back in St. Louis now. But I say to people, I'm not here to tell you how to run your organization. How do we become good ambassadors for the organization? How do we use the limited resources? There's limited resources. I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. You do have limited resources. They do have so much money, but they could run out if they gave it all away. How do you take those limited resources and make a big impact? How do you become ambassadors for a cause? As I signed the Jewish pledge agreement, Mike Levin is a friend of mine. And, I said, I'm going to give 70% of our money to Jewish causes. I think there's other great causes. Our family supports COCA, Center of Contemporary Arts, or I think they changed the acronym, but this is for kids to learn how to dance. African-American Black kids, how to learn how to dance. Craft Alliance, we support camps to there. How do we make a difference in these kids' lives so they realize there's a hope? And so there's limited resources so that COCA and Craft Alliance aren't competing for the same art space. How do you do that? No different than the Jewish organizations. How do we funnel the money so we're not having our own silos? So people say, well, I gave here, but really we need the money somewhere else. And, when you give to your synagogue, and I don't want anybody on this to think this, but it's really self-serving. When you give to something that you give because it helps the general public, synagogue, you're a member and you go. It's like the country club. But I feel by giving to nonprofits that are for the general public, that welcomes everyone, it really makes a difference. And I'm trying to get people to understand that. Be the good ambassadors for that. How do you strive to do that? And I understand everybody doesn't have the same amount of means. But how do we get people propped up so they learn that, and maybe one day they will have those means, and they'll have that philanthropic thought process that they will give the money to people and how they'll do it. And that's really what we're trying to do, to encourage people, again, to do that. And, we want to make a difference. And, it's brick by brick. It's not, you just don't flip a light. And, it's taken a long time for our foundation to find its way, 15 years now. But I think we're doing a much better job. We still don't. We want to know what our return on investment is. It doesn't have to be a 10% return. We want to make sure that we're spending our money and people are using it wisely, and then it makes a difference. And there's a lot of areas we're trying to do that in.
There's a lot of younger people in the Jewish community who have inherited money from businesses. Their parents and grandparents worked really hard, and they don't necessarily have the same philanthropic vision that you do. what do you say to that younger generation?
That's a great question. That's a hard one. I hope my kids are listening if they're on this call. They don't remember that you have to, I had a job at 13. I wanted to make sure I had some spending money. There wasn't a lot of money sitting around our home. The kids today have that, and I don't know how to inspire them. I see that a lot of times. I've watched, I remember there's a family here that did very well in the shopping center business. And I remember, soliciting someone for one of our causes. And he said, my parents gave all the money. We're good. Well, that's not quite how I, think about it. And a lot of people who've been given the money don't have the same motivation. So you have two different, you have the young people that probably grew up okay. And then you have the wealthy that really, it's hard because it's not their money. They're more interested in keeping their money than doing something good with their money. And they're trying to keep up with the Joneses. And that is my hard thing. And I know we talk to people all the time. And, sometimes I just get a little obnoxious and say, I saw you buy a $500 bottle of wine. And I just asked you for $500. Really? You tell me it's like it's the last thing you can do. And so I have to be careful. But again, if you get kids early and you teach them early, I think BBYO camp, Jewish camps, Jewish day schools, and going to synagogue, taking money to the tzedakah box. It ingrains you to think about that. And it's really that's the hardest question you've thrown to me tonight. And I really don't have a good answer for that.
That's okay. I think it's something that the whole community is struggling with, right?
It is.
I want to go back to the red coat behind you as a way to close tonight, because I'm just so moved by how important your father's influence was on your life and your memories of him. And it's really moving to hear about how you always choose to put the family name on things, that it's not your name, it's the family name. And I wonder if you wouldn't, just sort of in closing, tell us another little story about your father.
He was a workaholic. I remember, going with him, and, he was just a towering figure. And I remember we'd go, he'd drive around and on Sunday and we'd look at real estate. And, and I thought, well, here I am, 9, 10, 11, maybe 8, 7, whatever. And, I'd listen to him and I didn't realize what he was trying to tell me. Pay attention. And I was really lucky that he was who he was. He was very, very smart and very driven. And that's probably where I got that, because, you try to emulate who you're around. And he was very direct. But everybody that knew my father always said he was a man of his word and that they respected him. And that's really that's what it's all about, knowing that. And, there's less and less of those people around Omaha because, he passed away 53 years ago, and he was 39, so it would have been 92. So I'm sure a lot of his friends, but I remember being around a lot of these friends, and they were all Jewish, and they were all Jewish. And it was a great learning experience sitting around the kitchen table. I remember Yale Richards, the attorney, coming over, or Fritz Kastman and Eddie Belgrade. I remember all these guys, and he always made sure I was included. He dragged me and put me there, and I really wasn't interested. But something subconsciously, rubbed off, and it was a great experience. And I didn't appreciate it then. I appreciate it now.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. It's been wonderful having a chance to talk with you and hear about all the incredible things that you're doing. Really, we're very excited about the work that you're doing here in Omaha, but all throughout the Midwest, and especially the Museum of Tolerance, and getting a chance to go as soon as it opens.
It'll be opened, I hope to have it open 6 months from whenever we can start again. We were scheduled to be open in September, but we didn't quite make that. And we're going to open in phases. And it's been a labor of love. A lot of my family thinks I'm absolutely crazy because I'm sitting at night when it's morning in Israel talking to people, and vice versa. But I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of what we're doing at Yemen Ord and other places in Israel where we can really make a difference. And it's about making a difference, and we're going to continue to make a difference. And I'm glad to come back to Omaha. I told a group today, I grew up there. There's, someone asked me about 2 years ago, my greatest development. I've had a lot of great developments, shopping centers and buildings. And I said it was the St. Louis JCC. I've changed. It's the campus of the Federation in Omaha. Come January when it opens, it will be my best investment and my best development. So they say you can't go home. Well, I think I've changed. I'm not sure I'm going to live in Omaha, but I know I can go back. And I really appreciate what Omaha gave to me. And now I want to give it back to them.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's a wonderful way to end the evening.
Thank you very much. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And if you want any, you can call me anytime. You can't call after 10 or before 5 in the morning, but I'm good. So Jeanette has all my contacts, so feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.